Hi, I'm Marc Sumner, CEO and founder of Robertson Sumner. Welcome to the Channel Chat podcast, where we will share learnings, best practices and failures with some of the biggest names in the IT industry. Today I had the pleasure of Dave Allen in the studio, former MD of NetApp, former VP of Palo Alto Networks. Fascinating story of his rise to the top and how he actually got into those leadership roles. Actually was quite good because he actually gave his view on recruitment, which is obviously relevant for us being in recruitment of Robertson and Sumner. Actually gave some fascinating answers on CVs, interviews and how to prepare for companies. Also as well his views on leadership. So sit back, listen and enjoy. Hello, I'm Marc Sumner, host of the Channel Chat podcast show, and today I am lucky enough to have industry legend, I should say, Dave, I think, the former MD of NetApp and the VP of Palo Alto Networks. How are we doing, Dave?
Very good, Mark. Very good. Thanks. Nice to be here.
Yeah, thanks for coming.
Nice to see the situation live.
Yeah.
I know we went before.
Thanks for coming in. So, Dave, the question I always get to kick off the show, and it's something that I always ask, is how did you even enter this crazy industry of IT? What made you come into it?
My entry into IT starts a long time ago, Mark. I think formally I get to claim maybe 24 years of IT time. Informally I can claim about 35 years of time. As I said to you earlier, and I'm looking for the soft focus button on the mirror at the moment, thinking that ages me. But I kind of entered really tech very young. In truth, I had my first computer bought for me when I was 8 years old, a ZX Spectrum, and I learned how to program that damn thing in machine code and other things. So I got quite into tech quite early, doing networking and other things when I was 10.
How did you get into it? Was your family or
no, just to be honest,
just interest,
personal interest fundamentally. There were magazines you could buy for computing, and I was nerdy enough to actually read them. And I did clever things. I learned that I could hack games and other stuff. So a bit of a hacker. That then led me into the earliest bit of really kind of technology, really, when I was programming. If you remember, anyone old on the call, old enough to remember the ZX Spectrums and the Commodore 64s, then I worked with the company, that were writing the games protection systems, the software protection mechanisms to prevent piracy. So there were two on the market at the time, one called LensLock, one called SpeedLock, and I worked with the SpeedLock guys. A good friend of mine who was several years older than me was a part of that, a bit of a prodigy, I would say. He was very, very bright. And so I had all of the software code of all the games on my desk from the age of 12. My dear old dad had to sign a confidentiality agreement for me because obviously I wasn't old enough to sign it. So that got me cool stuff, free computers and other things, and went on from there. Was your family into IT? Or, what was your dad thinking of it at the time? I think my dad would just wonder what I did all the time. So my family not into IT at all. My dad, my mum, I guess essentially looking after me at the time and kind of secretarial kind of work, and my dad was a deep sea diver, so he was running around on the seabed of the North Sea, breathing 2% oxygen and helium mixtures, and I was at that point. So
he thought you were doing those hacking and computers inside. I
think he was just pleased that the lights were on in the house and I wasn't destroying them most of the time, and I was kind to the dog. I don't think anything else was too worried about there. So, but then as I grew up a little bit more, then all sorts of things, just taking stuff apart. He wasn't pleased when I took the TV apart at home. He said, "I'm just going to make it better, Dad." It did work when I put it back together. Not sure it was any better, but and then so when I got to that kind of point of choosing studies and things, and I went on to do I went to Edinburgh Uni. I went on to do microelectronics and semiconductor physics. I went and studied chip design effectively, and proper electronic engineering and such like. I spent a period of time working in subsea robotics. So for anyone that's watched older films now, like The Abyss, you get these ROVs, these remote vehicles that go underwater with robotic arms. I worked on those. I designed a control system for them, and I was doing a secondment with them that they put into production, as in a production device they sold. In the North Sea for scientific survey vehicles and things. During that time, blew some stuff up, quite literally, vaporized a few things, quite literally, and at one point the software engineer made a mistake and we flooded the entire back of the factory with it's a longer story, but anyway, various things you do when you're working with water, and then went from there, and I did the whole kind of undergraduate thing, had various different interviews with people at GEC. I did the Official Secrets Act and all that kind of stuff, GC Marconi when they were still around, and then Sun Microsystems, this crazy American company, kind of flashed up, and
Great firm.
brilliant
Great firm at the time.
I went and did their assessment day. They made the mistake of doing, I think, they were recruiting from all sorts of different backgrounds, like English students and law students, other things. And the guy made the mistake of saying to me, so as part of their standard thing, so what are the bits of a computer? And I said, would you like it at the silicon level, or the chip level, or the board level? And he looked at me with, oh dear. Anyway, so I managed to find some personality since, obviously. So I joined Sun as an SE. I joined Sun as a systems engineer, and since then I've plodded quite a crazy path in. Sun has to be, I look back very fondly and in some senses, quite sadly at the demise of Sun ultimately as during the acquisition of Oracle and other things. Some leadership lessons to be learned in there. I had the pleasure during my time there to spend time with Ed Zander, spend time with Scott McNeely, who were prolific for their time and ultimately really still are in different ways now. But Sun was a brilliant company. So I had the chance back then to work on stuff that today is still very, very relevant. So that's how I got into IT.
And then you moved on and went to NetApp. So tell me about your experience there. What did you join NetApp as?
So I joined NetApp to effectively set up for them what they called their deals desk, which is really their strategic kind of business winning capability, how to go and win larger scale clients and business. When I joined NetApp, that's after 7-8 years at Sun. I did lots of different things at Sun, and when I joined NetApp, they were in that kind of just sub $1 billion globally. So they were in that kind of classic, hyper growth phase. The next challenge was moving out of almost like the mid and the upper mid market, really into the enterprise. Selling to the enterprise needs different capabilities, different processes, other things. Coming from what at one point in the early 2000s was the largest market cap IT company on the planet, which was Sun. A lot of experience in that space and lots of different ways of how that business ran and operated. So NetApp recruited me to do that. So initially what I did was I brought some sales methodology to them because they didn't really have any, nothing kind of structured. Rather than send forms to salespeople, because no salesperson likes a form, I said, actually, if you want to get engaged, I almost like did a deal review type interview on the phone, find out where we're at, do all those things. I used TAS at the time, so target account selling, a Siebel methodology at the time, to use as a scoring mechanism. I'd send them back the evaluation I did and say, right, we now need to build the strategy, we'll go do these things. Picked up a bag and off we went, and would go and start developing the customer, develop the opportunity, negotiate. Quite often the stuff I was in bespoke contracts, different things, because they were larger bits of business that weren't necessarily where NetApp was. So that's what I joined them to do. And I'm not sure you mentioned the word legend. I'm not sure that's quite sure. Leg end might be a more.
Do you think? Just digress from that point for a minute. Do you think that whatever level you're selling at, whether it's SME, mid-market, or enterprise, you should adopt a sales methodology? Because a lot of people I get in, especially selling into SMEs and mid-market, don't. They're not classically trained in spin or Miller Hyman or whatever it is. They've got no methodology. It's just like, well, they're rolling on personality and their product or service. But do you believe at a certain level you've got to offer more than that?
I guess I do. So I would say, horses for courses, right? I think great salespeople are flexible in requirement in response to what the customer needs, what the customer demands. But someone who's selling small things to small companies is going to struggle selling complex things to global international companies. They with the same approach. The approaches don't match. So there are places for TAS, there are places for ESP, there are places for Miller Hyman, for the gold sheets, the blue sheets, all those kind of things, right? But if you're only doing a fairly simplistic sale, don't make it overcomplicated. So I think it kind of depends. In most of the vendor world, obviously most of my history, as you know, is in the vendor world, from the vendor side. And I'd say the classic kind of thing of market segmentation, the global accounts or your top enterprise accounts, and your mid-tier enterprise, then maybe your mid-market, and your commercial accounts. The irony is, in most cases, especially for the companies I've worked in, so companies like Sun, companies like NetApp, companies like Palo Alto Networks, where actually it's a value-based sell, meaning actually to sell and for the right commercial values, for the pricing and everything else, you need to establish the reality of the value of what the product brings. It's not a commoditized product. And so I think within all those things, ironically, all of those tiers, your commercial guys, getting a small company to part with 30 grand, right, is not necessarily an easier task in one sense, fiscally, than getting a larger company to spend 800 grand. In terms of 30 grand for them is maybe 75% of their budget.
Yeah.
800 grand might be 75% of their budget. So you still got to have a number of the same cores and skills, But but I do think having a method or an approach of some sort is there. I kind of think about it a bit like I say to people about diet sometimes. I said, no, don't be on a diet, have one, right? And I'd say the same thing almost about sales methodologies. Be flexible. Don't necessarily always use only the same one, but have a method or an approach that you take, and be conscious of which one you choose depending on the customer you're trying to serve.
Yeah, great advice. Moving on, so let's talk about your career at NetApp. So you started in that role, and then bring me up to date. So where did you go after that next role?
Yeah, so I mean, from NetApp, when I joined as the proposals and kind of the deals desk type of things, that got me into building a load of bespoke kind of financial things that we did with customers, negotiating some interesting things. I remember with Atos at the time, kind of was the genesis of what became really NetApp's storage on demand type pay as you grow, pay as you go type models. This was quite a number of years ago now. So as that evolved, then they said they needed to set up more of kind of, I guess, an operations type, sales operations type view. What they really needed was commercial operations. So what I found, various folks that will know me in the industry know that I can dance my way around a spreadsheet, right, pretty well, as well as most FDs will. But actually, I prefer my time in front of people. That's where I get my energy from. I like to be in front of people. So when I built the operations group, which is what they asked me to do, then I built it in the context of really how I wanted to operate. And so I operated really as a commercial director for a period of time. So everything, not just sitting in the background, but I like to get out in front of customers. I wanted to go and negotiate contracts. And all the things that got stuck when we got big global banking contract. In fact, 3 of them came along almost in parallel, and the sales teams were all stuck. And so they come to me. So I'm literally toe-to-toe with the lawyers of the banks and doing the things, driving the deals, because that's what needs to get done. I had good oversight.
Yeah, because most people, when they think operations, they're thinking process procedures, not salesy deals or getting involved in customers, etc. So that's, like you said, it's more of a commercial role, isn't it? So did you get a chance to sort of like bespoke that role to yourself? Because if someone gave me the operations role, I'd be like, no thanks.
Yeah, I think I did. I mean, and the way it came about, most of my career transitions, the ones I made several different ones inside Sun, clearly a few with some interesting pivots inside NetApp, and in most cases, most of them have said the job descriptions come along as like 2 lines. We think we need something because we need to get better at this, and then it's kind of left hanging. Like kind of, could you do that? And I'm kind of looking, we haven't really defined it yet. Oh, great, I'll get to define it. Yeah, cool, I'm off. And so I think in the answer, I got to create it in the way that I wanted. Therefore, and not. I'm not sure it's egotistical, but not to try one's own trumpet, but I'm quite good at doing analytical stuff, and it's kind of just a bit of inherent nature for me. So it doesn't take me long, which means great. I can get some of the stuff done sometimes that maybe some people would find a bit more complicated to do, and I can then spend my time doing what I love to do. And what I love to do was different things with people, and I saved all sorts of different situations in there. I'd find myself coaching salespeople about actually sometimes just the chance to say no. It's amazing how many salespeople I came across that had never said no to a customer. And so you're on all these kind of fires are burning in negotiations. You're going to go, well, where have we drawn the line? Oh, I can't draw a line. What if they don't buy? Well, I said, if they buy at this, we don't want to sell it to them anyway, so let's find a line, right? And interestingly, kind of doing a lot of that. And I found that in a lot of cases I would get, I'd say, quite good complete picture, which most people didn't have, which is why I would describe it as a commercial role. So we'd be in the middle of negotiations. We're obviously trying to sell products with future volumes and all the kind of good things. Often the people negotiating the contracts and the customers didn't understand the products well enough, so they were trying to push us into crazy things in deals. Sales guys, native sales guys, almost not necessarily great at positioning back to these types of people what the value is in what we were doing and why it was different. So I would bridge those things back to the real negotiators for the deals. And then in the process, then someone would go and get an approval from finance to do early pay discounts, and someone would do something else. And I'd put it all together and go, it's great that we can do this, but why on earth are we going to do this? I said, well, our day of sales outstanding is 32 days. I don't need them to pay us 15 days in advance to give them 3 points more off the back end. Screw that. Take that out. Take that off the contract. But finance approved. I don't care. We don't need it. And so I put those things together to get what was a good, solid deal. So I did a lot of that.
Do you think a lot of sales guys, because I have it with some of my guys when I actually say to them, if they're negotiating, people, if you've always gone to the point where you start negotiating, you say, well, I'll go and ask them, we could do that. And it's almost like, no, we definitely can't do that. And if you say that to someone, definitely I can't, no one's going to ask again and again and again for something you've already said you definitely can't do that. So what's your view on sort of a negotiation where you have to say sometimes no to the customer, and it's not always, the deal doesn't work. It's always like, we definitely can't do that. We can do this, but we definitely can't do that.
I think you have to get. I think you have to get clarity. I have a fundamental belief in business and my experience as an individual contributor, and then later in various leadership roles. Clarity is crystal important. People need to know where they stand, whether that's your team, or your people for your business, or whether that's your customer, your partner, whatever else. Need to know where they stand. One of the things I think is often rushed past by a lot of folks in sales, and we've all done it at different points in time, is the idea of planning your negotiation. A lot of people don't plan their negotiation. If you ever come to the concept of the elegant negotiables, so no, I need to find classic things. I need to find something that's of value to you that doesn't cost me much. That's where you're training. Everyone has to bundle some training. Right? I'm going to give you some training because it's of value to you. It doesn't really cost me very much. Or some other thing, or some goodwill, or a testimonial. That's of value to me. It doesn't cost you much. Because I'm trying to launch a new product and you're a prolific customer. So if you could say some great things and go public with me with a study, that's actually of value to me. Those kind of negotiables that obviously are outside of that. And then the classic thing on price. And what I've found with folks. I remember doing a negotiation, one of the sales team negotiations in NetApp with a very large telco in the UK. and the sales team had got to the point where we'd be classically negotiating discount frameworks, which is always fascinating to me as well. Well, I used to get 60 points off, and now I want to give them 70 points off, or whatever. It doesn't matter what the numbers are. And I go, well, what made you go from 60 to 70? So, it was just 10 points. Well, why didn't you give them 3.2? Why didn't you give them 5.6? And you can just see that kind of almost never thought about it.
Glaze in their eyes.
Never planned, right?
Yeah.
And then, but we can't give them any more. I said, so this is now going to be a really rough negotiation, because when it looks like you've already fallen by that much, there's more, right? The concept of the human, there's more.
The first ask, he dropped his pants for 10%. Yeah. Oh, we go to 80 now.
Yeah, exactly. And so somewhere in there, I say, so plan it. So if your walkaway price is, that's all your discount. If your walkaway discount is 70 points, then how are you going to get there? What's the? You're going to
how many
start
steps
with 5,
are you going to drop?
What to 2, what to 3? When are you going to draw a line? When do you because the customer somehow during that process often needs to start feeling it's getting more difficult. I know I'm getting near the edge here. I know there's not much more I can ask for. Good procurement guy will always ask for some more anyway, right? I always describe procurement people as the antichrist of sales. They get up in the morning sharpening their teeth, ready for their pound of flesh, and you've got to be prepared for that. And demonstrate value, so they appreciate there's value in there. But you've got to have a walkaway. So I think, I do think people need to plan negotiation. I do think it's often overlooked in the excitement or the rush or the busyness of a deal. And actually sometimes back to that almost that thing I mentioned around, what the finance aspect of the deal is versus the operation aspect of the deal versus the management, whatever those things are, the whole picture. Sometimes there are values in different areas. When you put it back together and demonstrate it back to the client, they go, okay, I can see why this is now a good deal, because you're solving other problems for me in the process. So lots of different ways to do that, and I think some people obviously just try and get it by winging a prayer, and sometimes that works.
So your role as let's call it this obviously sales operations role.
Yep.
How long did you do that for?
I think I was officially ops director for about 18 months only. So I just to give you an idea. So when I joined NetApp in end of 2004 really. So and I think in 2009 I became the MD. So that was my journey to managing director in between that time. Interim for that I was the ops the ops commercial manager. Then I became the commercial director, and then I became the team. So it's always an interesting reflection for me about in terms of. So I went from individual contributor fundamentally to a manager of a couple of people, of which actually you guys helped place. Thank you for those. So at the time to I think managing a team of 5. To managing an organisation of 200.
Now, Dave,
it was a bit of a brutal awakening.
Yeah, how does that happen? Because most people will be sitting there listening and thinking, individual contributor, maybe go up to sales director, take the traditional route, always going to be given the top job. So how do you go from individual contributor, operations, and then actually they think, yeah, this guy's the man to run the organisation? Because it's not a usual route, is it?
Folks have told me it's not unusual. Yeah. I think for me, for a bit of this, some of this actually takes us back again a little bit into my Sun time. So when I was at Sun as an SC, I was number one doing account SC work. So an SC, any salesman doesn't think the SE is in sales needs their head read and a good smack. So number one, and then part of my job role in the SC was what they called the marketing technologies group, doing all the shows, all the external stuff. Then Sun built their customer briefing centre in London, actually on London Bridge, what is now I think a little Waitrose, a bit sad, but at the time just on the monument side of London Bridge, and it was the only one outside of Palo Alto in the US where Sun's headquarters was, and so I was amongst the folks. We built that place, literally built that place, and made it all up and everything else. Then I spent really 2 years giving pitches every day to customers. So in that sense, so customer facing, which is why that whole everything I've done throughout my career, I've always done it with external stuff in mind, even if there've been internal things to do. I did loads of different things. Now I actually trained. I in my son time, I was a trainer for a period of time as kind of part of my SE role, really. And so I trained about 2,500 people in the UK channel over about a 2-year period on enterprise and workgroup computing on Sun systems. Classrooms of 25 to 30 people. So lots of different things in there. So it's not just that I don't necessarily have an operations only background. I've done SE, I've done consulting sales, I've done almost like business engineering and consulting. I've done large deal management. I did sales operations. So all of those different things, actually, I ran quite significantly in many cases across multiple lines of organizations and business. So I think
give you a breadth of knowledge across a lot of stuff.
And I think where I got to the point in NetApp when the leadership role was up, and there was a classic kind of not the dot-com crisis, that was the other one, but the financial crisis, and things got shifted. There was some organizational change. There leadership change occurred, so there was a gap for a period of time. I was the one with the plan. I was the one with the all of the kind of operating characteristics of the business at the time. So almost without agenda, to be honest, almost to your point, not necessarily expecting to get anything from it at the time. So we needed to get some stuff done. We had the timing of the business. We had a year to finish, a quarter to close, and all that kind of stuff. So I stepped up, put the plan, put the next year's organization in place, and all these things, just because that's what needed to be done. We closed the business. We closed well. We had a good fourth quarter. All that kind of stuff at the time. This is 2008 into 9, all right. And then it kind of came up, went, maybe I should actually put my hat in the ring for the job, So I did. And I
were you apprehensive about doing that? Were you apprehensive, or you just thought actually this is the next not logical step for me?
I think I was at that point in that where it's a case of I've definitely outgrown just the realities of what I'm doing, and I'm doing other stuff anyway. And I think fortunately for me in many senses, and I think because of what I've been doing with the organization, the sales organization, and whatever else, I was, people have their own opinions that were in that up at the time, but I was kind of like the go-to guy anyway. Right. And so then I had the opportunity then to go do something else, and I think a combination of those things. Was I apprehensive to your question? A little bit. I was a little bit probably skeptical, because to your point, it's like when I looked around and went, well, normally it's the guy that was the sales guy last and everything else. That's not my route. I spent lots of time in front of customers, but that's not been my route. But I think where NetApp was also looking was also that kind of that breadth. It was an MD role, not just a sales lead role. So I was a statutory director of the business. I used to send the finance guys screaming when they asked me to sign the accounts, because I would ask questions. And if you ever want to get a finance person in the vendor world, or in US companies screaming, go and ask them how they made the Black-Scholes share calculation for valuation on a P&L. None of them can tell you, but it's brilliant sport. They break out in hives and everything for a period of time. So I think it was a combination of those things, that helped me land the role. I remember being sat in a room, kind of when we were getting the who's been chosen, and they, NetApp had benchmarked it, a couple of internal candidates, and a series of external candidates. And so I remember being sat in the room, and my boss, German boss at the time, little voice, we'd like to tell you that you've been successful and you got the job. And we had an all hands downstairs in like 15 minutes time. And I was like, oh, okay. It's one of those kind of, that's cool.
Yeah.
And they go downstairs, and I was, I think, grateful to this day. I went downstairs. It was announced to the organisation, and there was, there was some really genuine applause. The other internal candidates both sent me a note saying, we're right behind you, congratulations and everything else, which like I say,
gracious.
Gracious and grateful for. And so that then led on to other things. So MD for the UK business for a few years in NetApp, and then we changed the structure of Europe. So I took on the Nordics and the Benelux countries and other places, and did that, and that ran me until late kind of 2015. So it was a great journey. I'm super grateful for my time at NetApp. Learned lots, had the chance to do lots. I think a lot of trust was placed in me to do things, and I'd say I guess somehow born out of longevity and other things. I think most of the time, touch wood, I think I delivered good things for the organisation and the people. We had a lot of fun in that time.
Great. Now, how does a guy that's in storage, that's come from an operations background with an MD.
My daughter used to keep me on and say, Daddy sells disk drives. Thank you.
How does he get an opportunity to go and, at the time, relatively unknown. They weren't that big in the market really. How does he get an opportunity to go and run a cyber security?
Yeah, I mean, that came to find me. By the time I got to 2015, in my time at NetApp, I was bored, and you could see, George Kurian just came in as the CEO at that time. Actually, I did a couple of road trips with George when he was in Europe in the run up to that. As he's obviously still the CEO at NetApp, and you could see he wanted to embark on another phase of transformation journey, which made perfect sense for the business, and when I looked, I'm thinking, so what does that mean? In my mind, I'm calculating, going, that's 3 years, because it's like, year to make the change, year to embed the change, year to kind of, one of a phrase, harvest the change, right? Kind of thing. Yeah. And I'm looking, thinking, 3 more years. Do I feel like I'm here for 3 more? Because I think, for the business, I need to make that commitment. Right. Yeah. And I just tested it on a mixture of other midlife crises going on at the time as well, personally. And so I kind of went, what, that's not the time. So I just been a bit more receptive to classically some of the calls that one receives, or one's lucky enough to receive. And some of those, one of them was one of the large city search firms for this company, Palo Alto Networks. My initial response was, networking, not for me. No. to which I got this kind of somewhat sort of chastened reply of, it's not necessarily network and it's security. I went, tell me more. So
did you dismiss it straight away when you first heard about it?
I'm almost, it's almost petulantly by name. I said, if it's networking, not for me. The reason for that was that, having spent a lot of time, as you say, in storage, think back to my Sun time where we did a mixture, but really big Unix, big servers and storage and other things. I'm thinking, I'd like to come out of the base of infrastructure and do something different. So I was starting to think more about SaaS organizations. I'd looked at a couple. There's actually a training organization that had come and talked to me, like a global training organization. It would be quite different, kind of again more like a general manager, managing, directing type role for them. So I was looking for something to take me out of the almost out of the hardware space in a way, at least by relevance. So initially I'd said no because it was networking, or I thought just because of the name. Who calls a security company networks? But actually, a bit of time in there, and I now knew exactly why. But after unwrapping it a little bit and understanding what they were, and then I did the classic thing like I did with NetApp and anything else. Palo Alto was listed. So my advice to anyone that's thinking of joining, especially a public company, is go and read the annual report. If it's a US company, go and read the E10K. And you usually find somewhere inside the first 40 pages, between about pages 20 and 40, you'll learn everything about their organization, their employees, their competitive threats, their opportunities, and everything else. So I read that and went, okay, actually that's quite interesting. Had a bit more dialogue, met with a few people, and then did a circulation into the US. Met with the then chief executive, Mark McLaughlin, who was very impressive. Spent 45 minutes drawing on a whiteboard with him, and just went, he was definitely a key reason for me to go. Okay, I like him. I like his humility. I like he's smart. I like his capability. I like his vision for where he wants to go. Okay, there's something to be done here, and then obviously started to look around more what was going on specifically in the cyber community at the time, and then in a strange sense, the way I introduced myself to Palo Alto Networks when I joined, I said, this is my 3rd round of security. I don't know, what do you mean? Because obviously coming from storage, right? But as I mentioned earlier, I started my career actually in ciphering and games protection systems. So the concept of security and computer-based security was not new.
It wasn't alien.
Although I don't want to say it was quite as developed as it is today. It's a little bit different now. And I did laugh. I said, I think the last firewall I'd configured before joining Palo Alto was probably in about 1999-ish or 2000-ish time. It was a checkpoint firewall. The last one I physically made myself back when we were building the briefing center for security. So I said, so number one, I've got this thing. There's number two, actually, during my degree, I was a nightclub security bouncer. So that's my second security thing. So I said, in a sense, the way I described it is I'm back. But huge amounts to learn. A couple of interesting things about the channel in there, which is, I think, having obviously NetApp, very partner-centric organization. Some was a very partner-centric organization. So I spent a lot of time as the vendor side working with the IT channel. So joining Palo Alto, I think the bit I'd underappreciated was obviously just the dynamic and almost an extra reminder of the diversity of the channel, because in many cases many of the partners weren't necessarily partners that I knew. Coming out of if you like NetApp. Now there were some that the bigger, broader, the big item players, so your computer centers, your SECs, these kind of guys, maybe Logicalis and a few others, that were kind of the bigger players. But there were a number of smaller organisations to
niche players.
Yeah, I mean, but then they've come from the networking side. So what I realized, obviously, early days of firewall, security's evolved so much in the last 4 years. So it's really come from firewall, perimeter-based security through cloud-integrated, functionally integrated security, now into the idea of security at the service edge, which is a different model. And there's a huge amount of play in there. So I guess making the transition itself, they found me. I'll come back to your original question. They found me after a little bit of not really realizing quite what it was, bit of due diligence. Worked out well, and I think we found relevant chemistry.
Do you think, just going on the back that they found you, do you think that, say on paper, yes, you've been in a leadership role, but it's more general management, but on paper you had that security. Do you think CVs nowadays mattered, or because meeting you in person, if someone said you were an SC to start with, I'm thinking, well, really? Dave's got, I'd be like, techie, not really, but or Dave would be a good fit for security if he's come from that sort of legacy infrastructure. So how do you think CVs are getting over the lines? Because a lot of people now, they'll send their CV and they'll just get him stopped straight away. And you must have interviewed hundreds of salespeople yourself.
Yeah.
But how do you think it's affecting people now if they're doing this CV and they're not even getting they're not even getting an interview?
Yeah, I think that's interesting. I think some of it's the CV and some of it's the how much time and attention people are paid to them, even when they get them, actually. So, but I think you see this stuff going on with LinkedIn at the moment. I'm starting to do a little bit of work with LinkedIn, as in the organisation, and it's kind of interesting with them. So people are moving away from kind of here's all my it's like Cub Scout days. Here's all my badges to here's my story.
Yeah,
and that becomes a little bit more engaging and interesting to folks. Sometimes that's hard to get over on a CV. One thing I found, it's interesting. So I think the recommendation often from firms, I don't know what your recommendation would be, is how long should a CV be? So out of interest, what would you say how long a CV should be?
Well, I think I would say 2 to 3 pages, 4 pages maximum.
Right.
Obviously, if I'd almost go as far as to say if you're a graduate, 1 page. If you've been in the industry 4 or 5 years, 2 pages, 3 pages.
Right.
If you've been in the the industry sort of 15, 20 years, 3 pages, but no more than 4. Because no one wants to read it.
No, I get that.
You start reading, you think, it looks all right, yeah. Scan over it, that's it, interview them. Because they do want to hear someone's story. No one really wants to hear, the ins and outs of, Dave, tell me about how what modules you did at your degree. Quite frankly, I don't care about your degree at all. You can talk about your degree at Edinburgh. I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in your story.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think people are actually writing these things down and then expecting people to read them. Oh, didn't you read that on your CV? No, I didn't read it on your CV. I'm interviewing you now to ask you what you're doing now.
I mean, how many people start an interview by kind of casually looking at the page 2 and 3 and 6 they've never read it before? And going, okay, anyway, let's have a chat.
No, but it's almost like they're reading it. It's like, what's this guy's second name? Oh,
yeah.
Right, yeah, all right. Alan, come in.
Yeah, so Alan, come in. 1 second. Who else interviewed him?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Any feedback? What should I look for?
Yeah. Did you like Alan or not?
Yeah. So I think you get a bit of that. I think everything you say there is kind of true. Thinking about, as an interviewer, I mean, for me, I think I am.
What do you look for?
I scan a CV. I am looking for a little bit of, depending on what the role is, a little bit of almost, do I recognise any relevance in the brands and the people you've worked for, right? If I'm about to employ you to be an enterprise salesperson, high-end enterprise salesperson, and I look through and I don't recognise any of the organisations that you've been to, then you're going to have to be pretty compelling to explain to me how you've sold into the types and the levels.
Would you give an interview though? Would you even look at him or her?
Good check on the diversity there. Maybe. How do you get off the fence with the maybe? What would make me look? Something of interest, I think, in the profile somewhere. Why would we have found them in the first place? I mean, a lot of the time, I guess, a lot of the time in terms of search, it's different firms putting people forward.
Yeah, would you go on the recruiter's recommendation or the internal recruiter's recommendation? Dave, this guy's, I know he hasn't got sold, I know he's got no enterprise companies on his CV, but he is absolutely stellar. You need to see him.
That would definitely be a steer for me. I've always had good a good line of sight and good relation, and kept the talent recruitment folks in my organisation pretty close, because that's such a big piece of everything that an organisation is about.
Well, they're telling your story, aren't they?
People's number one thing. And actually, one thing I'll give credit, in Palo Alto, the staffing team there were very, very, very good. One guy in particular, who was, I used to run weekly calls with him and everything else. I listened to him interview, and I listened to him tell the pan story, and I think, he does a pan story better than half the sales guys do. He was selling the company in a really good way. So when he would say to me, listen, I've interviewed them, and we had enough time to get to know each other, and I said, listen, this is what I want to know. And he would go check for those things. So by the time he brought them to me, it's a case of, I know this one looks a bit left field, but she's really great, or actually he's done this thing, I really like this. There's only one thing I'm not sure of, but I think you should see them. And that was part of it. The other way I'd also filter them out is if we really did waste your time. So now and again you get those, right? And it's like, I don't do it that often, or I haven't done it that often, but cut an interview in like 10 minutes. And
have you done that?
I have done that a couple of times. And
what's made you do it?
What two things? One of which is absolutely, clearly, not a chance on earth that this is going to be a fit. So categorical, absolutely clear in mind for whatever purpose, whether it's culture, whether it's previous experience, whether it's just style, whatever those things may be, absolutely clear on that. And the other thing, then the reason I would cut it short, is if I honestly think the person has the robustness to take it. Otherwise, it's pretty freaking destructive. To be sort of 10 minutes in, you think you're there for your hour, and someone says, "This ain't going anywhere." Really appreciate your time, and so they need to be reasonably robust. Yeah. But so I've only done it a few times. But actually, where I was going to go with that was afterwards going out to the staffing team or whoever. If it was me, I'd tell myself off. If I found them, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Or if it was someone else that found them, I'd say, listen, put back on the table. Don't do this again. And let me tell you what it was. And I'll give some feedback about the process, about the individual, about the range of experience. Just said, and I'll ask the question, usually as a hiring manager, especially in my last number of years, right? Usually I've been through a couple of hiring managers before they get to me because they're working for someone that works for me, right? And so you see, I'm bringing this person forward, and wow, why on earth did you bring them forward? What was it that you saw in them? What did you check? How did you validate? What did you address? How did you uncover this bit of experience? When I dug into these three things, this fell apart immediately. Did you inquire there? Or was it just I quite liked them? How did you do that combination of kind of qualitative, they fit, they've got the culture match, they've got the right values, and I think that's really important in hiring, versus also the competency.
How would you, and it's a great question you've said there, because a lot of people go on do I like this guy and I think he'll get on the team, and they're just sort of give him the job. How would you interview for values? How would you drill down on that to actually think, right, this guy has got the right values for Palo Alto?
Some bits of it you can get from just asking how they situational things, how they handle certain situations, how they handle classic things, how they handle conflict, and some of that might be almost like personal conflict. What do you do? Or it might be deal conflict. Tell me especially if you're hiring from the IT. Tell me the last time you got into conflict with a partner. Anyone that says I've never been in conflict with a partner, throw them out straight away because they're obviously not going to be honest. Whether they're from the partner, or the partner, someone from the partner joining. Tell me the last time you got into a fight with the vendor. Because it just happens, right? So, and listening for and sensing for honesty, because integrity to me is a critical thing. If you're not going to be honest with me, you're not going to be honest with the customer. That's a surefire way to get into a problem. And if you seem, for one phrase, if the way you communicate back is sharky, I don't want sharky in the way that I deal with my partners and the way I deal with my customers. So certain value sets in there. A little bit sometimes, and you've got to be careful in the world of compliance interviews and HR and stuff these days. But a little bit of, what do you personally value? Right? Yeah. How would you describe? How would someone else describe you in terms of your personal values? What would they say about you? Why would they say that? And sometimes people will share stuff that you can't always ask for. Well, I coach the kids' football team. Okay, maybe there's a give back thing in there. What's going on? So I'm looking for a series of things in there to get a feel for values. So you can ask some situational type questions, some scenario type questions. Those give you a bit of competency, and in the process give you values. And I do think there is a certain piece of it which is a feeling of rapport. But I think what most people forget when they're doing that rapport type interview is that people love people that are like them.
Yeah.
Right.
And that might not be right for the job.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Right. And so I've had enough time with myself and enough 360s and personal evaluation diagnostics to know where my biases are, and so to consciously step out of that and kind of go, actually this thing I like about it, it's almost like a warning. Okay, so actually, just park that for a second. Now let me just make sure I do go and drill in on. I
might like to have a drink with him, but I don't know if he can do the job.
Yeah, and you've got to get both, right?
Yeah.
So it's a mixture of those things for me. But I think I don't know if you've got the right values and there's a bit of competency missing. I still think you can teach and train that. I think if you've got some good competency but the values are wrong, that is something you probably won't fix.
With preparation for interviews, now you mentioned earlier about. You looked into the company report and you read the company report, etc. Before you even considered having an interview. What do you expect a candidate who's come to see you for an interview, and it might be a final interview, and maybe I'm not saying that they've had to prepare a 30, 60 night presentation, nothing like that, but what are you expecting them to be prepared naturally to convince you actually this guy's going to be suitable for our firm?
Great question, but before I forget, let me deal with the 30, 60 night thing briefly. I banned those.
Really?
In interviews. They are the worst possible thing in the world. Yes, I read the Watkins book, 39 first 90 days, blah, blah, blah. I don't want any more people to come and tell me, in the first 30 days, I'm going to work out what it is. In the second 30 days, I'm going to go meet some people. And in the last 30 days, I'm going to look really good and do some great stuff. Thanks very much. Don't piss away 90 minutes of my life.
Or they rolled out the previous 30 days, 90 days they did for the previous company and just changed the logo.
and I think it's a waste of time for an interviewer because what are you going to learn? Really, what are you going to learn about the person in that space? So it's a pet peeve. So we had them for a period of time.
Would you ask them to do a different presentation? What would you?
I'd ask them for, I tend to set them more like a scenario of some sort or a marketplace. I want them to come in and say, you're coming in to join us. Say it's Palo Alto, and that doesn't really matter. Tell me something. Tell me about the market. Or if they're coming in to drive a particular vertical, so we're hiring for someone to work in automotive. I want you to come on. I want you to tell me the current. I want to know the trends and the macro environments going on in automotive. I want to know how you're going to map value propositions to that. I'd like you to take a view as to how you'll map maybe wherever you're coming from, your value proposition, because it's the one you're most familiar with, so I'd expect you to do a good job of that. Then take a hack at mapping ours. But to be clear, I'm not expecting you to ace that because you're not in the company, so you're not going to know it as well as the guys who've been trained. But I want to see those things. So then I'm going to get something of industry relevance. I'm going to see whether you think and understand the industry. I'm potentially, hopefully, will learn something in the process about industry, an area that I've not looked at. Oh, that's a great little nugget. That's nice. I love those kind of interviews. Someone comes in, and in the process of the interview,
they've educated you on something.
They bring some value.
Yeah.
I'm thinking that's awesome. I mapped to that, right? I'm thinking that's great because I'm always hungry to be learning more. And then, as you start to look at, how they would map a value proposition, I think people that call people in and say, right, come in, I want you to come and give us our company pitch. I'm thinking, I work for a long time, a lot of organizations, right? And I think you go back in your own organization and say, who are really the good pitches? It's a classic thing, right? Everyone does the golden pitch. Who are the good ones? Every organization's got some that are actually really good, and they've probably got their own style about how they deliver. And you can have some that, to be quite frank, absolute train crashes.
Yeah. And they might have been there years as well.
But that's the point. And but they've never adapted to change properly and other things. And then you bring someone external in there who doesn't. I have had a few examples where we've recruited from external, from competitive scenario type environments, right? So from, not from direct competitors and other things. And some people have come in and actually they have taken that bit on and they've done an absolutely blinding job. A mixture of those things. I think if they haven't read, especially in a listed company where the information is available, if they haven't read the most recent results, if they haven't dug into, I would say the E10K because it's the most logical US company, most logical place to go with the company report, then how do I even know that you've done your due diligence to think that you're making a good decision? So it gives me an insight into what you do. If you don't do due diligence on me for what is in theory your freaking livelihood and your job and your family and everything else, how good a job are you going to do when you go and look at a customer? Rock up to JP Morgan, and say, "Oh, you're a bank."
Yeah.
Damn it! I wish I'd read about that somewhere. Right?
I thought you were a clothes shop.
Yeah. I thought this was just that run in the park thing in Battersea. God damn it. I do expect some due diligence and some inquiry on the company. I think it's great if it comes with questions. Yeah. As in,
do you like to be challenged in an interview?
Absolutely. I like people to come and say, I saw this and I wasn't sure. And that's certainly what I've done historically in interviews I've been in when I've been there. Usually I've got some questions. I go, this is interesting. I can understand that. I don't understand why you made this move and what this meant. And I read this in the analyst. These guys said this to you. How do you feel about that? I think those things are great. It creates dialogue. And of course, part of what you want to do in an interview, you're trying to find, you're trying to initiate. I think as the interviewee, you want to initiate some engagement. Otherwise, it's more like a parade. Turn up and I'll just booty parade myself and tell you some stuff. Then I'll go away. Now you talk about me, and it's
Do we like him?
Yeah.
No. What's your view on when we were obviously recruiting for companies? Classic term they don't want to see. Mark, we do not want to recruit job hoppers. We do not want people that have had 6 months here, a year there, 6 months here. Now I'm going to have my own view afterwards, and I'll give you that after I get your answer. But what's your view when you interview someone that's been, say, a year, 1 year? What's your view when you interview them? Do you believe their story, or are you very sceptical every time?
Yeah, I think unfortunately the answer is it depends. How believable are they in their story is a part of whether I believe their story. What's behind it? What was the honesty? And people I think If it's that's almost, and also how many, right? Because if people hop, then hop, then hop, then hop, there's got to be something not happening there. Yeah. Either they're making the wrong choice, it's not the right company for them, they didn't enjoy it. How well do you make decisions? How well do you do your due diligence? A bit like talking about the E10K.
Yeah.
Did you understand what you were getting into? And the answer, no, I don't think I did. Well, why not? Well, why didn't you take responsibility and accountability to go and do the due diligence? So you did. So at least you made an informed bad decision. I think quite people make uninformed bad decisions.
Yes.
So I think I would certainly look at it for that. And so if it's like maybe one or two, then I think number one, I think everyone's entitled to a mistake, right? And don't judge on that. But what have you learned? What did you learn about the process? What did you learn about yourself? What does it encourage you to go and do differently? And I want to see what's happened in there. But to some extent, if it looks like it's like 1, 1, 1, 1, and why would we be any different? Why now, really?
Yeah.
Chances are, in truth, chances are that if it's one, then if it's like 1 year gig and they're talking to us, then I'm thinking I'm probably just having a reasonably normal conversation. There was a mistake. What was it? Tell me about it. If they seem honest, then I'm willing to believe. And sometimes, depending who it is, obviously we can all do our back channel chats and just to make a few quick calls and say
it's an incestuous industry. Someone's going to know someone somewhere.
Yeah, and always the case. I think if it's when it gets maybe 2 or 3, I need to drill. Probably much beyond 3 in reality. If I'm just being honest. I'd probably go, you really need to be super impressive with something very compelling to tell me why.
Yeah, and for the listeners out there, that's exactly what I say to the candidates. If it's 1, okay, 2, 3, you better now make a right. 4, you've got a problem, because if they're not making the due diligence themselves, and I actually say to them, you can say all the time saying, oh, well, Dave changed the commission structure, and then Dave made me redundant, and then Dave said I had to work from home, or whatever the reason is each time you've blamed them. The third or fourth time, it's on you. The due diligence has got to come from you. And you might get the odd mistake, but it just can't happen 4 times on the trot. So when the listeners out there saying, when job hoppers, it's not just the companies that send it to us, the recruiters are actually saying it to them as well, because we want to pass on the feedback to them. So do due diligence if you've made a couple of mistakes.
I agree with that. And actually, you remind me of one of the exercises that sometimes I like to run with people in general, and it can apply in this sort of situation where someone does exactly that. Well, Dave did this to me, then Oracle did that to me, and then Anthony did that to me, and then my wife did that to me, and then and the kids, you see what the kids did to me. And listen to all of this and you go, wow, okay. So what a victim, right? And the victim mentality piece. And I've done it various times, because this happens in our partner screwed me, and then this guy did this to me, and then the customer changed the requirements on me, and all this kind of stuff, right? Whatever
they pulled the PO,
the budget changed at the last minute. Really, at the last minute?
Yeah.
All of these kind of things. You kind of go, all of this, you listen to it, and just victim, victim, victim. And sometimes I like to say to people, that's a fascinating story. What if we just turn that around and you tell that same story to me now, just for the purposes of an exercise, one of Einstein's thought experiments, an exercise, but where you are 100% responsible for everything that happened. I didn't understand the comp plan. I didn't position myself with enough value to Dave, so he didn't think I was the right person for that role in the first place. I actually didn't tell my wife I was coming home late 42 times in the next month, so she got a bit pissed with me. I didn't do this. I never set the rules for the kids when they were young. It's no wonder now they've destroyed the TV and whatever those things are. Yeah. So what if you tell it that way? Because I always believe that and I think this works in leadership for teams and people as well as in personal life. But that whole context of empowerment, when you talk as the victim, you're unempowered and you can't make change because it's the world happening to you and you can't change that. It's too big. It's everything else. When you say I was responsible, then okay. So could you have positioned it differently, Dave? Well, yeah, I could. Okay, so now suddenly there's an action you could take, or could you have done this? Could you have phoned the wife? Could you have? Well, yeah, I could. So now you're in a position of empowerment to go and take action. And then I say, so now go and take action.
Yeah. And that self-awareness, though, to realise that. Not many people do that, because we've come from the age where, we talked about earlier about, that sharky mentality. But if we go back, say, 10 years, salespeople, it was okay. Was it okay? Maybe it was okay to be a bit of a blagger. They were sort of like, I've convinced the company of this, and I've power closed the candidate that. And it was almost admired to be like that. And now transparency's on the rise, isn't it?
Yeah.
Do you think transparency on the rise and being more self-aware, if you can be more self-aware, is that down to sort of social media, us being more global, or why do you think it is? Because if you'd gone back 20 years, double glazing salesman, I've done a deal, that was almost, like I said, applauded. But now, if someone comes and do that, it's like, fraudulent, no credentials, no
Right.
honesty, not transparent. We've done our due diligence and then we don't want to deal with him. So why do you think that's happened?
Yeah, I think you're definitely onto something there. For some reason, I've got the whole Glenn Ross sketch in my mind. You want the good leads? Yeah. You can't have the good leads.
Yeah. Coffees for closers.
Coffees for closers. Always be closed. ABC. And I think we're not quite in the boiler room of the 80s and 90s now. So I do think it's interesting to mention about those social media as a change. The pleasure of doing a dinner one time was actually with Accenture, where Alistair Campbell was the guest. It was just only about 10 of us. And so Alistair Campbell, if you remember, obviously he was the spin doctor for Tony Blair, right? Fundamentally, he wrote all the Labour Party comms back when the Blair government was kind of peaking in a way. So it was very interesting to listen to. And his view on social media was very interesting, which he said that because of the advent of social media, he says he sees a big shift in many things, is in policy and obviously in companies and in business, because he said before social media, almost like before, as you say, the double glazing sales guy, you could, for someone to believe that you were a good company, you just had to tell them.
Yeah.
Because you managed your message, you managed what got let out about you, managed all those things.
And they couldn't find anything else about your competitors or what else. They just had to believe your story.
Right. Whereas what social media has done in several sense, I think product, policy, government, personal, all those things, is kind of said, in some extent now, the only way to have a good product is actually have a good product.
If you're good enough, you'll rise to the top.
Yeah, and you'll rise to the top because almost the nexus of forces of things about social and who shares what. The classic thing down in Canary Wharf. You want to get stuff done in Canary Wharf. Go at the pub at the end of the day, and all the bankers are in there. All the IT stuff, all the banks are in there. That's where stuff gets done. And if you think that the thing you did with Bank A won't translate to Bank B, you're absolutely wrong. Of course they're going to talk about it, right? Even though they're competitors, I can assure you they link. Yeah. And so I think that whole context in the space of a salesperson. And as you mentioned earlier, it's like an incestuous industry in many senses. It's such a small industry, moves around so much that quite often now there's kind of few degrees of separation where you probably all know someone that knows the person we're talking to or about, right? And so, are they any good? Any of that. And so if you don't manage that, and I think the only way really to manage it now, to some extent, is to live it and be it.
Yeah. Have integrity, be honest, be transparent, do the job.
Yeah, do the job.
Don't try and blag
do
it.
The job. Made a mistake, own up to it.
Yeah.
Whoops, I screwed that one up, but I got these ones right, and I think that's okay. So I do think
people respect that as well. If you have messed up, it's like, look, I've messed up, Dave. I'm sorry, but it won't happen again. Yeah. Not trying to. I didn't do that. You kind of did do that.
yeah. No. We saw you do it.
Yeah.
We had to unbook it because you messed it up. Whatever those things may be, right?
Do you think? And this has been a hot topic on the Channel Chat show for the last few weeks and we spoke about it very much earlier over lunch, was honesty and transparency and collaboration in the channel. And I'm seeing it as everyone's saying that's what's needed, but what I'm seeing is it's not really happening. So for an example, I've heard that there could be an example where you'd have two partners that have got a deal, the vendor's in the middle, and one of the partners might get the end user to write a letter to a vendor saying, actually, the integrity of the other partner, that that they're fraudulent, they're this, that, and the other, almost slanderous, to basically get you to choose. Yeah. Now that's not good, is it?
No.
Does that happen?
Oh God, yeah. I think after 23 years in fundamentally go-to-market in multi-tier channel environments, I think I have genuinely seen just about everything in every direction. I've seen some great partnering, some really high integrity, early engagement, massive value.
You don't have to say the names. Tell me a good example of a good partner and what they would do.
I think a good partner exhibits the right values for a start. You mentioned honesty, trust, integrity, number one, and I'd say almost has the right intent for the customer. So that's good. That also means they can hold check and balance with the vendor, because most vendors like to think they're everything to the deal, but actually in most cases, most partners are bringing multiple vendors together to go and deliver a solution, right?
Yeah.
Customers are buying a solution, vendors are selling a product, and you've got to, I think the vendor needs to be also honest in that. So I think within that process, and great partners have got a range of not sound too cliche, value-added skills. They've invested in the right types of people, the pre-sales and the post-sales, the consultancy, the things to, at the end of it, bring a really strong, viable solution to the customer that's more complete than probably any one of the vendors in that solution could offer. I think for me, that's something good in there. That brings you into skills and accreditations and other bits and pieces as points of measure. But I've also seen accreditations be a tick box exercise and not really have any impact at all on who actually goes and delivers the business on the reseller. So there's different things there around
Someone's
trust
good at exams. They're
the
exam person.
I have looked at that before and kind of gone, wow, look at all these accreditations that one guy has here.
Yeah.
It's like, okay.
He's an expert in 20 vendors.
Yeah. He's your most valuable player. Why is that? Because if you lose him, you've just lost 17 different vendor accreditations. So I hope you're paying him well or her well. So I think that's key. And then early engagement, because the vendors, what do you want? You want to get into businesses where you're not, or you want to expand into places you're not in existing businesses, those kind of things, right? And so great partnerships are where for me where the partner has some intrinsic relationship value that can be openly and kind of collaboratively leveraged, as well as the vendor. The vendor should also do the same thing. And there's really a proper kind of integrated message. It's one of those times where actually no one's worried if all of the people are in the same room at the same time talking to the customer, because there's nothing to hide. Now,
that's quite difficult to measure, isn't it? You can't feel that, because you're talking about relationships and honesty and transparency. It's not something you can actually tick in a box of that, is it? Or is it just a feeling?
It's not. I mean, you can monitor it to an extent from a point of view of understanding your sales cycles and what the engagements are where. To some degree, you're right. I mean, some of it's kind of anecdotal feedback in a way, where we're at, and any vendor leader at any point in time will look, and you can look at your pipeline by various different metrics, like which sales guys doing it, which not, which partners currently leading, and what is it that partner leading us just that one deal, or is it because they've done 50 deals, and lots of different ways to look at what that is. And to some extent, I think as a leader, there's an element of part of the judgment comes from the volume of noise, because what I'd say about that is bad news travels fast. Right. So, and in both ways. And when we started this by what I've seen good partnering, those are some of the things. And I've seen great partnering. I've also seen some shocking partners. I've had it where people have done their whole letter writing thing, and I'm going to write to you, and even just the things where they write to the customer and say, okay, we could give you a better price, but you need to write to the vendor right now because they've got a deal reg. And if you write these words, then they'll have to open it up, because of competitive law and other things, and I've looked at competitive law, so deliberately a long time ago now, because of a lot of these sort of things. You'll get
partners write to you and say unlock a deal reg from that other company.
Oh yeah, I'll get partners write to the customer, for the customer to write to us, because they know if it's the partner that writes, we're going to say no, we've got the deal reg. Any vendor that's got a deal registration process, it's really sacrosanct for a vendor. If you're going to have a deal reg process, you need to stand on it and behind it.
What percentage of vendors have deal reg processes?
Well, crikey, that's a question you're probably better positioned to know than I am. I think almost all, to be honest with you now, that really are operating. If Channel's part of their strategy, they have to have one. Otherwise,
if they're channel friendly, they need
if they're channel friendly, because otherwise, in a sense, there's always going to be competing forces. Vendors are competing with other vendors, and partners are competing with other partners as well for the same vendors stuff, or taking competitive vendors in. So I don't know what the percentage is, but I would think it must be quite high, to be honest with you.
And without naming names, what would be an example of a bad practice for a partner to do, or someone you think, we're not going to work with a partner like that again?
Yeah, I mean. There was a time I travelled around for 3 weeks with a cancellation contract in my briefcase, debating whether I was just going to serve it on a partner, just because I'd actually just got to the end of my.
Really?
Yeah.
What had they done?
I chose not to in the end. And examples of many of the different things. But I think so. But coming back to your question. So what is the what are some of the worst things? I've seen all sorts. I've seen situations where sales guys have gone into a situation following on from a deal to talk about the next phase of the budget, and the customer says, but I just spent all the budget. And we're like, on what? On the other deal. And we're looking at them and thinking, well, how on earth could that be the case? Because we know what our outbound pricing was. And then you kind of work out, holy crap, they've just been screwed by the partner. And you kind of go, wow. And in those situations, that one of those blew up into a proper escalation, as you can imagine, in several different senses. And it's pretty hard, the partner saying, well, it's not for you to know what we did. And I say, well, hang on a minute. We're supposed to be all collectively servicing these guys. Appreciate we're not part of your end user pricing. That's not that.
So you've given them a prize.
We've given them a prize.
They've put an extra on someone, and they've blown the budget, and you don't even know about it.
Yeah, and then we go on to say, oh, no, there's an extra thing we could do next on this, and they kind of go, we haven't got any budget left. And we're, wow, holy crap! So that'd be a great example. That was an explosion.
That's not transparent with you, is it?
It's not transparent with us. It's also, I think, it's the wrong thing for it's the wrong thing for the customer. It's it's profiteering, and everyone wants to make a profit. And I think business, come back to that, business done well, business engaged early, business with value positioned, should be profitable for everybody. And a lot of the time where it's been done that way, then there's actually almost no need from a vendor perspective to try and do margin handling and other things, right? And such with the partners. Make us, if we've done these things right and we're positioned well and the customer knows this and the customer's not driving the price down too far, then we've got a place where everyone makes some great money. And that's your nirvana, right? But bad news travels fast. So when someone gets screwed, the problem is they go and tell everyone in their team. And the same way, by the way, I've also had to do a couple of disciplinaries on vendor people when they've screwed the partner, no question. And I looked at this and went, you took that reg and this, and if I found out, if in those situations, if it came to me before it got done, then there's something I could do about it. Sometimes I found out after because done's done, deal's closed, vendors in, and then this freaking grenade comes launching. What the hell is this? And I go and dig in, and it's very, very clear that actually, the vendor sales go on. My guys ultimately was to blame, and I've taken a couple of very specific corrective actions on that, because just in the same way you screw one partner, then why wouldn't every partner think you'll screw them? Of course they will. Same way in any partner, you screw one sales guy, they'll think you'll screw them all.
What advice would you give to a partner that wants to enhance their relationship with you as a vendor, whether it's either at NetApp, Palo Alto, or whatever vendor it is? What would they need to do or to demonstrate to sort of say, well, look, I want the best pricing or the best margin, or I want vendor accreditations, or I would like more leads from you, or whatever it is? How can they enhance their relationship? So all the resellers out there will be thinking, I'd love a better relationship with X vendor. What should they proactively be doing?
Yeah, I think as the leader of a vendor business, you're interested in a number of those things actually. No one, just as no partner's interested really in substituting vendor A out for vendor B and making no more gross profit, no more gross margin. No vendor's interested in having partner one come and take all partner two's business and be a new route for the same amount. Everyone's on about growth, right? It's all growth. Especially in US-driven tech. In fact, especially in the tech industry, right? Half the tech industry valuations are driven by growth rather than profitability. If you look at what goes on in the industry right now. So I think so you're really looking for someone that really has a strong and credible growth plan. So I think what is in that. So some of that's going to be willingness and ability to invest in the right skills and capability. Something that then says, here's how we'll augment what you do as you as the vendor, as I'm the partner. Here's how we're going to augment what you can do. We can provide coverage in these areas. We're building managed services around what you do here. We think this can work. Things that provide service and extension, market access and reach to areas maybe where where the vendor's not got strong penetration. It's also very useful in large accounts where they operate with different divisions. That sometimes brings its little tensions because often anyone who's working in an account thinks they own the account, and you're dealing with a BP. Well, it's one of the largest FTSE 10 companies on the planet, kind of thing, right? So no one owns BP. Lots of people do business in BP type thing. So
I love it when I hear and for all the reseller candidates out there, I love it when I hear this. Yeah, I've got a great relationship with Santander. They're in my pocket. They go to the new partner. Yeah, I can bring Santander. Oh, Joe Bloggs is dealing with Santander as well. Oh, is he? They have no idea. They might be just dealing with one little section of Santander, and they think they've got the whole relationship locked down. And unfortunately, at enterprise level, unless it's the whole solution, you haven't got it locked down. No. Especially if you're just selling kit or whatever it is in there.
No, I think that's right, and I think that links a bit to something we talked about earlier over lunch, which was hiring. Do you hire for things? I heard various folks will hire for a Rolodex. And I've always been pretty cautious about hiring for a Rolodex. It's nice to think when you're hiring someone, they're going to have some account access in some places. But my advice to anybody would be never make that the sole reason for hiring anybody. Probably sounds pretty obvious, but I've seen it done. You need to have the confidence in the value set and the Rolodex piece, because people move. He's a Santander guy, and next thing you know, he's left Santander.
Mm. Like I think it gives them access, doesn't it? But would you say then,
based on the individuals can move, and then suddenly, actually, well, that was the account we wanted to work on. Your guy's no longer in the account, so if that's the only value you bring to the business, then you're now screwed.
So when you look for, you've interviewed hundreds of sales guys. So when you look for a sales guy that's coming in and he has got a Rolodex of people, and you're maybe questioning him on that, what is going to impress you about him, about his contacts? So say, for instance, he says, I can bring X, Y, Z, and you're thinking, well, that's all the value you can bring. What else are you looking for to think, actually, there's some substance behind this and he's worth taking a risk?
So in just to understand the questions, you mean substance in terms of the kind of quality of his contacts, or you mean other stuff outside of the contacts?
Other stuff outside of the contacts. Because, he can bring the contacts. He said, look, you can't get into Santander, I can get into Barclays, I can get into Metro, and you want a finance guy. Yeah. I can do that. Yeah. If that's all he's got, what else do you look for to sort of validate your own opinion on him?
Well, and so so anyone that's got those relationships, I guess I'd be saying, how did you get them? Where did you nurture it? Where did you go? How did you use that to branch out into other parts of that business? How solely dependent on you? You just give me, the old day, the CIO of Barclays, great. Who else? Who else? Who is influencers? Who are his stakeholders? How can you use that to traverse across the team? Where have you done it? And what did you do?
I don't want to be interviewed by you guys. It doesn't sound good at all. It's like I've told you I've got 4 relationships. Stop asking me.
And I go to his house for a barbecue at the weekend. I've had everything. I've had everything like that. Oh, they're my best mate.
I told you I know him. What more do you want?
I've even had the one. Oh yeah, that's my neighbour. That's great. And
he's moving next year.
He babysitting his kids as his work. I've had a mixture of those. But I'm looking for those things, and back then also the values and the things we talked about earlier. The value set. If you've got integrity, you've got honesty. Have you done your due diligence on us? Because that's going to give you an indication of what you do. If you know that company so well, tell me some things I might not know about them.
Brilliant. My last few questions.
Yeah.
You've got to the top of your game. You got the dream job that most people in the channel would love, and then you've come out of it.
Yeah.
What made you take the brave decision, or the crazy decision, or the smart decision, whatever it is, to think, do you know what, I'm going to go and do something else now?
Yeah.
Whichever decision it was. I don't know if it's brave, smart, or
Jesus, all of the above. I did spend a little bit of time interviewing myself about that same thing, jumping out of jumping out of a perfectly good working aeroplane. And Palo Alto Networks is a tremendous company, cybersecurity leader without question. And security is a great industry. By far, it's the fastest piece of tech. And as a minor aside, for 2 reasons: you get to compete with other great vendors, part one, and it's the only part of the tech industry where you've also got an adversary. No one else has that. If you're building databases, you're not competing with someone who's trying to ruin databases. You're just building databases better than somebody else. In security, I've got to be better than the Fortinets, the checkpoints, the Ciscos, whoever else. Oh, and I've got to beat the guys that are trying to beat us all.
Yeah.
So that provides this
double threats.
This double edge of sword. So in that sense, just to compound the point, it's quite an exciting industry, and it's relevant. It's front page news twice a week. You can have dinner table conversation about cybersecurity. Much harder to have that about disk drives. So just as a side, found out very nice. They spin their magnetic.
Very good story.
Yes, really nice. Your USB key. So I mean, you can try. So I mean, back to your question. So why make the move? And I think it's just a couple of things. So I think the range of my NetApp time and experience as a GM was great, and I liked the ability to strategically represent. I had nearly $1 billion business, $100 million of OPEX and other things to go on, make a lot of decisions to get things move. And I'm a strategist kind of at heart in a way. I think in terms of business, a strategist in terms of the business, and then I like to think I'm a mobilizer of people. And I think if I can do those things, then magic can happen. And I'm fortunate that in many cases in my career, teams have delivered, for the business and for me, and thank you, grateful, as well as the partners. So I think when I got to the edge of the time at Pan, I got a few things going. I've got a personal project I'm working because we can in autism and autism therapy that needs some time to get to clinical trials and some funding, and I'm not going to be able to go and do that with a full-on high-speed corporate job. Part one. So that was kind of one thing that's playing in my mind that I wanted to go and spend some proper time on, which I have been over the last several months, but rebuilding foundations to go, as in the foundations of something to go and then get clinical trials and things moved for that, because we could help a lot of people there. We could help probably 50 million people with that. So that's kind of part A. Then the other side of it, a lot of my time in leadership, I've really increasingly over time, despite how we started the conversation coming from tech, I've really, it's people, and I've had the chance now to have, let's say, more diagnostics done on me than any probably human should in a normal life. So that's the chance of many gifts to know myself well. And no, I screwed that up. Yeah. So I've had all of that, and I think during that time I did NLP practitioner training, so neurolinguistics and these sort of things. I've done just about everything that Tony Robbins, and who's one of the most prolific coaches in the world, has ever done. I've been to all these things. I've done the firewalk. I've done a firewalk. I've done 2 firewalks, 1 totem pole jump. I've had a hug from the big guy. He's a big man.
Yeah.
6'8" worth of giant. Anyway, so things in there, and actually my natural tendency to focus around people links back to my early days of being trained in change and change acceleration, and people in organizations driving change have a horrible habit of focusing, especially in tech, on the tech, on the system or the product. and you can make the product a little bit better. But if you haven't got the mobilization of your people, you're screwed. You're not going to ever get there. That's why most organizations fail to make product transition and change, because the old school guys don't transition to the new school, because it's the people. It's not the tech. It's the people. You never got them engaged in their mindset and all that kind of stuff. So I found more and more time in there. So I kind of came out to do, number one, spend some time on the autism thing, but actually as a role, to pick up on doing kind of team effectiveness, a combination of leadership type transformation and coaching. So to take amongst many things I've learned so far with I think touch wood, a reasonably good track record. And start to deploy those back in a different sense. And you mentioned earlier, I have some training background in my history anyway, a mixture of different things across the business. So, and I've done three hyper growth businesses. Because some was hypergrowth when I was there. It was already established, but it went from 13 to 47,000 people in 3 years. That's hypergrowth, right? That's the kind of stuff that your AWSs and these guys are doing at the moment. That kind of multiple. In NetApp I've been in various different roles and done the leadership. I've transitioned now to a leadership team from within the team. That's a set of transitions. How do you keep the right people and do that, and that adds certain dynamics and change. And then I'm going into Palo Alto Networks as the leader, and changed industry and all those good things. So
you only know disk drives, Dave. We're not going to listen to you.
That's right. So I can talk my way. So just a list of things in there, and I think for any business going forward, and you can look at your kind of your popular leadership kind of guys like your Simon Sinek's and these two chaps, right? The whole start with why. Yeah. It's so much more now. And you mentioned about the world's changing for sales. It's gone from braggart to a little bit more humility and transparency. Yeah. And I think that kind of almost like the rise of the person in the business is becoming more important, and I can help people with that, both collectively, individually, and also
leaders eat last sort of scenario.
Kind of that type of thing. Yeah. And there are just ways to reach and to contact and to engage. So I'm spending right now time doing that. So that's kind of where I'm at, working with several large tech firms actually now, and hopefully more to come.
Brilliant. And my last two questions. So people are going to look at your career and think, wow, I'd love to have got from where you are, from being a graduate when you were younger. So what piece of advice, whether it be to a contributor or a manager who's got aspirations to go to the top, what piece of advice would you give them to sort of say, this is how you're going to stand out in the tech industry and in our market? This is how to make a name for yourself.
Yeah. It's a great question. I think there were a few things. Now, if I flip back to my personal kind of journey, if you like, and trajectory for a minute, then one of the a couple of things I set in my mind that my I use incessantly, and my wife says, you can tell when he's been somewhere. And a couple of belief systems almost. One of which is that complacency is the number one killer of companies and dreams. So that means when you're stuck in a comfort zone is a beautiful place, but nothing ever grows there, right? So number one, if you're comfortable, ask questions to yourself. Why am I still here? Am I still here for the right reasons, or am I here for the easy reasons? Because personal growth and development. So I think in that sense, the way you make move, you can you need to take charge of you and your own development. You're in charge of your career. Your manager's not in charge of your career. You are in charge of your career. You're in charge of how you turn up in the morning to go and make things happen. Whether you turn up in a good state or a bad state, pissed off or happy or whatever, you're actually in charge of that. So take freaking charge of it. It's your day, own it, right? I kind of have those kind of beliefs in my mind. I also think there's a concept of if you believe you can or you believe you can't.
You're right.
Whichever way. Yeah, you're probably right?
Yeah.
So I have this belief in clarity, positive psychology, and action are probably the three biggest determinants. So clarity of what it is, what is your purpose, where do you want to go? I think I want to go there. Well, how could you get to the point where you're clear that is what you want to do? Once you have clarity, then almost everything about what you start to do starts to mobilize you in a direction. And that's not about maybe having, in a career sense, that's not necessarily about saying, I want to be this title, but it's about, I want to lead people. I want to be the manager. Why? Why do you want to be a manager? Oh, 'cause I think it's a hierarchy and it gives me more pay. Well, actually, depending where you go, to be honest, once you move out of individual contributor, especially sales work, chances are your ability to overachieve gets diluted. I can assure you, when I had a quota of $900 million, it wasn't so easy to get big percentage overachievement, right? Extra 10%. Oh, it's only 90 million. Oh, well, that's it. So your motivation's got to be different. So get clear on what you want. Get clear on why. And then I guess my other thing I was saying is self-awareness, feedback, and action on that. So get feedback. How do I do? What do I think? What's the first impression that I leave? How do I know? Who did I ask? Who's honest with me? Do that. If you have the opportunity in any organisation to do a 360, most people kind of go, because actually we don't want the feedback, right? But go get it. Nearly everything that comes out of nearly everything that progresses people in life, on average, has come out of a way they've ultimately handled something that was probably slightly adverse. Be it trauma in life, be it parental divorces, or accident, or the loss of a loved one, or something you got really bad and you got fired for. It doesn't have to all be terrible, but often there's some form of adversity. It was really difficult, but I overcame it. And then they move on.
Everyone loves a comeback story, don't they? But there's no setback without a comeback. There's no comeback without a setback. Sorry.
And so without having to have disaster in your life, that whole kind of 360 type feedback model. Gives people, okay, well, I thought I was good at that. Well, turns out that's not the common opinion. Now, you could be offended by it, you can be hurt by it, and all those things, but just go and understand it. And then back to victim versus responsible kind of mindset. Don't be the victim. Well, I'm going to own that. What am I going to do about that? If that's how people see me, that could be important to me wanting to get to that next step. So I'm going to go change that. So when I did that MD transition in NetApp, there's no doubt that part of it, I remember getting this feedback from a lady. She was consulting to us at the time. And amongst the trivial things she said was, "You've got to get a different suit." I'm like, what's wrong with the suit? She's like, it doesn't. It's not an executive suit. I mean, it's a really nice suit. She said, it's not an executive suit. And I'm going to go, wow. I was almost offended. It's like, but what are you trying to say? So I look terrible.
You don't dress well, Dave. Sort it out. Come on, take the hint.
It's one of those kind of, it might sound like a really trivial, that simple thing, which is one of those little things. But what it was about, when you want to make the next process, understand what it is. Look it, be it. Wear it, own it, act it.
Yeah.
And it's not kind of was it play until you get what's the expression is? That's that kind of blag it till
fake
you get
it till you make it.
Thank you. Fake it till you make it.
We've got through that on that.
Yeah. So I had every other one, right? But it's not as much about that. But there's an element of truth to that. Yeah. And I think so. Back to those things. So awareness, get some positive psychology, manage yourself in terms of how you want to show up, and show up the way you want to. Make a decision. I'm showing up today, and I'm going to be like this, and this. Most people just fall into their day.
Yeah.
So do those things, and I think then whatever way you want to go, because it will change over time, then you're pretty much in control of your destiny.
Great. My last question, Dave. You've been a fantastic guest. Really enjoyed the show. Is there two people in leadership roles that you think the listeners would get a lot out of you, and who could you nominate for us to get on the show?
Who would I nominate for you to get on the show next?
We'll have a call out for them.
Yeah. So I think someone I would nominate, because I think he's got a great value set. He's appear in a fast-paced industry. I think you'd enjoy him. He's also got history in the channel. Be Rupert Clayson, who runs UK DAC for Fortinet.
Yeah, no Rupert. Yeah,
Rupert's a great guy. So I think he would be one.
Met him a few 8-9 years ago now. I placed Tanya with him in his management team. So yeah, I'll reach out to him. He'll be a good one. Yeah,
he would be good. And are you thinking from any part of the IT environment or anything else?
Yeah. Anything you'd think someone would get value out of? You think would be a good guest?
I think someone that would definitely bring insight, opinion. He's done some great things. He'll be a bit of a handful. He'll bless me for saying that. Would be Jason Clark, who now runs Maple Networks. He was formerly the CEO of Proact, and before that was the MD of B2Net back in the early days in the NetApp channel.
Okay, so I don't know him.
Clarky. So Jason did a great job. He did the sellout of B2Net, done various things. He's just set up his own company about 18 months. About 18 months ago now. I think Maple Networks and Security now to build a managed service business there.
Well, Jason, expect a call soon.
Smart.
Great, Dave. Thanks so much. You've been a fantastic guest. Thanks a lot.
Thanks
Cheers.
so much. Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining us and listening to another episode of our Channel Chat podcast. If you've enjoyed what you've heard and are listening on iTunes, please could you give us a review and subscribe in order to get the newest episodes as soon as they're released. Otherwise, as always, we release an episode every Thursday at midday, so hopefully you can join us then.